Well, YouTube, I don't know how to say it. I was going to start off this show with a big-time introduction for the big bracket breakdown. Ooh, so exciting, so awesome. And then yesterday, that all changed. If you've been following me, if you've been following my projections leading up to Selection Sunday, if you've been following all this, you know that I mean, it has been fluidly changing, but for the most part, I had him locked in, I had him locked down. And there was one team that I just did not want to see in the field. Only one. And it seems like every single year, there was always one. It happened in 2010. I said, Clemson doesn't deserve to be in there. I hope they get waxed. They got waxed in Dayton. 2011, though. Or not 2010, I'm sorry, it was last year. That was Clemson. 2011. VCU, what the heck are they doing in Dayton? They proved me wrong. Made it to the Final Four. And now this year. All week after championship week, I had said all along, I don't think this one team has done enough to get into the field. All week. And then yesterday was the big day. Yesterday was Selection Sunday. And I'm watching the TV. I'm glued to CBS. I'm watching it. I'm hyped as hell. I'm so excited. They revealed the number one seed, the overall number one seed, Louisville. I'm like, okay, that's no surprises so far, yada, yada, yada. But then, the fifth game they show, or no, it was the eighth game they show on the screen, because they show the 6-11 last. They show that 6-11 game last. And who do they show? I'm looking at it, rubbing my eyes, thinking, okay, is that a misprint? No, the middle on there can't be right, can it? Did they just drop that off and make sure that's Tennessee and not, just Tennessee? But no. And so I must start this video off, unfortunately, by saying this. WhatTheFark.com is Middle Tennessee doing in a tournament? I mean, oh my word. Again, it happened again. The only team I miss. One team. When making my final projection, I don't think I've ever gone 68 for 68. I don't think I ever have. It's always one team. Last year, Clemson. 2011, I didn't have VCU. Now, Middle Freakin Tennessee. What did they do in the course of their season to warrant a selection? I have no idea. And of course, Joe freaking Lenardi has to have him in the field, and he has to have 60 out of 68. Maybe we should put Joe Lenardi on the selection committee next year. Oh, he can get him right all the time. If you sit Lenardi and I in the committee, we'll probably be arguing next year about Xavier or Dayton, or Charlotte. I could not believe it. See, that is the head scratcher for me this year. The committee has rewarded, and Jay Billis and I share the same take. Colin Coward this morning played a clip of Jay Billis and sharing his take on this. The committee rewarded teams that really didn't beat anybody from these so-called mid-major conferences. And I understand that mid-major teams have had deep runs in years. I understand that. They've had these runs, like George Mason and VCU and Butler. I get that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing for college basketball. It's not. But when you are basing it on just number of wins alone, not on who you've beat, that's kind of an issue. Now, with St. Mary's, I didn't have an issue. St. Mary's, I had in the field because they have a strong team ahead of them in Gonzaga. Their only real tough losses were to Gonzaga, who's, by the way, a #1 seed. And they have a great player in Matthew Dellavedova, who I would have hated to see miss the field. I can't name one player on the Middle Tennessee roster. Not one. And I know that people are going to bring up the excuse, well, did you watch them play? How could I watch them play? Did you ever see Middle Tennessee on any major TV network? I didn't. I didn't even watch them in the Sun Belt tournament because I only watched the final. But they lost to Florida International. They lost to Florida International, who was not even close to being in the tournament discussion. Their only major win came over Mississippi, who, by the way, based on where they're seated at a number 12, they probably wouldn't even been in the field had they not beaten Florida in the SEC tournament final. That tells you to me all you need to know about Middle Tennessee. I would have either put, Tennessee in the field over them, maybe even Virginia. Other than that, I don't think anybody else is close. But today, I'm wearing yellow for a reason. You know why? You know who I had over Middle Tennessee? And I know people might hate me for this too, but I had Southern Miss in over Middle Tennessee. You know why? Because here's why. And I know, again, people are going to crow at me. Oh, Middle Tennessee has at least a quality win. Southern Miss had their chances. They were 0-4, 0-5 against the top 50. They never beat Memphis. You know what? They did something that Middle Tennessee didn't do. They got to their conference tournament final. They got to the final in Conference USA. And Conference USA and Sun Belt, both pretty weak conferences. There's a top-heavy team at the top, and then there's everybody else. So don't tell me that the Conference USA is weaker or better than the Sun Belt, because really there's no difference. Okay, they're both pretty weak, okay, as a whole. Southern Miss did something that Middle Tennessee did not. They made it to their conference final. And they gave Memphis all they could handle in that championship game. They took them to double overtime. And yes, they ended up losing by 12. And maybe it was the whole ran out of gas theory. But you know what? I reward teams that play hard. I reward teams that make a strong effort to knock off the high and mighty. I reward that. Middle Tennessee couldn't even knock off, they were the high and mighty. They were the high and mighty in that Sun Belt Conference. Everyone was coming after them. And they couldn't even knock off a sub-RPI 100 team in their own conference tournament. What kind of justice is that? Southern Miss Golden Eagle fans, Tennessee fans, Virginia fans, for all y'all that are going to the NIT, I feel for you today. Of course, my team's in the CBI, so I can't speak for much. But for you guys that deserve a spot over Middle Tennessee, I feel for you today. I stand with you, Golden Eagles. I stand with you, Volunteers. I stand with you, Cavaliers. Heck, I might even stand for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Because at least one of you should have deserved a spot in Dayton over Middle Tennessee. I hope Matthew Dellavedova and St. Mary's just waxes the floor with Middle Tennessee. I hope it's not even close to show that committee what a mistake they made. All right. Just had to start with that because I just had to get that out there because as soon as I saw Middle Tennessee's name on the screen, I had a feeling of not goodness in my pants. Okay, and it was like crapping the pants. It was just absolutely awful. I screamed at my television. I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? I just don't understand. And Billis made the point. He said out of Middle Tennessee, St. Mary's, and LaSalle, they combined for 4 top 50 wins. 4. You know how many Virginia had? 6. So they took into account more Virginia of their bad losses than of those other teams. And don't get me wrong, again, I'm not slamming the hammer on the little guy here. I'm not really doing that. I'm just saying that there needs to be more taken into account overall than just one factor. You know what the committee's excuse was for putting Middle Tennessee in over those teams? Oh, they played better on the road. Road record is one factor. It is one factor in the entire body of work. One. When I make my projections, I look at everything. I look at road record. I look at RPI or BPI. I look at strength of schedule. I look at the record in the last 10 games. Who's been hot? I look at who have they beaten, who have they played. But the road record is just one minute factor in all of this. And oh, by the way, again, how far did you get in your conference tournament? Middle Tennessee only made it to the semifinal. Southern Miss made it to the final game. I just don't get it. And I just hope that tomorrow in that game, and I'll be watching, you better believe it, I hope Matthew Dellavedova hits like 10 threes, sets an NCAA record, just goes buku on Middle Tennessee, and show the committee how they got this wrong. VCU made the committee look great in 2011, but Clemson didn't last year. I hope for a second straight year they make a mistake. All right, so with that said, it is time to break this down, unfortunately, with what we have. We really can't challenge the committee too much. We really can't do – complaining will do us nothing, but I just feel like I had to put that rant out there because of how frustrated I am with the fact that Middle Tennessee is in my field. But here's how I have done it on ESPN's Tournament Challenge the last few years. I usually have played 7 brackets, and I know a lot of people, again, will say, oh, you should only play 1. They have the Mike Greenberg concept, sheet of integrity. Nah, just play 1. Look, this year is a better year than ever to play multiple brackets. This year is just better overall because there is so much parity when it comes to the tournament. There's just so much parity this year. So really, can we call some of these things upsets anymore? Colin Cowherd mentioned it on his show this morning. He has Creighton beating Duke in the 3rd round. Is that an upset? I don't think so this year. Why? One reason. Doug McDermott. The guys that I talked about being team slayers, like McDermott, like Oladipo or Zeller at IU, like a Zeke Marshall at Akron. These guys, team slayers. They play hard, they fight hard, and they do good things for their team. I don't consider that an upset. In layman's terms, an upset is a double-digit seed beating a higher seed. So a 7 over a 2, I really don't see that as an upset. So, but with this year, the fact that there's been so much parity in things, I think this year's a greater year than ever to play multiple brackets because you can have so many different possibilities, so many different scenarios with different teams. They've even said there are probably a dozen teams that could win this whole thing this year. And you know what? I honestly agree. But here's the thing. Here's how I do usually the 7 that I play. I usually play 6 based on the same factors every year, and then I play 1 kind of different one. In the past, I played a bracket where I just flat out flipped a coin. But I was getting so sick and tired of that flip a coin bracket always doing terrible, and trust me, it did, that I've added something new this year, a new factor. So, the 7 that I usually play, I play 1 bracket, and this was my winner last year. This tells you how many upsets there weren't last year, because it was mostly chalk, was the bracket based on ESPN's BPI index. Now, if you don't follow ESPN, the BPI, or Basketball Percentage Index, or I think Basketball Percentile Index, takes into account like their margin of victory, which the RPI does not. It takes into account missing or injured players. It takes into account the location of the game. It takes into account who their offensive and efficiency ratings, like KenPom.com does. It takes all that into account in the BPI. So ESPN uses that as a tournament indicator. Maybe that's why Middle Tennessee got in, because they had a better BPI than RPI. I don't know. But again, so I use 1 for the BPI. That was my winner last year. Out of the 7 that I played last year, now granted, I've never won the whole tournament challenge before. It's very tough to win. But the BPI for me was my best bracket last year. My second place bracket last year was the one that I usually go the strongest with, and that's my gut feeling bracket, or called Fearsome Pickin'. That's my gut feeling. That's just based on what I have seen all year. That is the bracket that I play that I'm really, really, really confident in. Third bracket, came in third last year, the Predictor, based on Jeff Sagarin's ratings and his Predictor, which you'll find on the far right side of the Sagarin ratings in the blue. He has the teams ranked, and then he has on the right-hand side this thing called the Predictor. He says that is the best predictor of future games. That bracket for me came in third last year. Fourth, a bracket I call Winsanity, kind of like Linsanity, but it's Winsanity. That bracket is based on the number of quality wins that a team has had this season. How many top 50 wins have they had? How many good teams have they beaten? That bracket came in fourth last year. Fifth bracket is one I do really just for fun. But because, as you probably noticed on my Twitter site, I have an affinity for college mascots in general. The fifth place bracket last year was the one called What's in a Name, based on my favorite mascots. Sixth bracket is one called Upset Specials. It's kind of like the robot bracket, if you will. It takes into account all the other 6 brackets that have already been done, and it either goes with the majority or it breaks a tie, or the opposite of what the Fearsome Pickin' bracket does. It's kind of like it goes through all the information, and then like a robot just spits out a name. That's the upset special bracket, but also intersperses some upsets here and there to make things interesting. And then finally, the new bracket for this year is called for me Road Warriors, the Road Warriors bracket. That is based on a team's true road game record. And there's also a few upsets in that one too. There's a true road record bracket. So those are my 7 for this year. I'm going to share with you on here not only breaking down all the matchups, but also my picks in the Fearsome Pickin' bracket, my gut feeling bracket. This is the one that I'm the most confident about. Even though it didn't win last year, it still came in second, and usually for the most part, when it comes to the championship game, I've done a pretty good job nailing it. A few years back, I nailed Illinois and North Carolina and got the winner right. I nailed Kansas-Memphis a couple years ago. I nailed Kentucky-Kansas. Of course, everybody had Kentucky because we knew Kentucky was the dominant team. This year, it's harder than ever. But I am pretty confident in this bracket. I'm just so strong in this bracket. So, let's take a look now at the matchups. Starting with the first 4 in Dayton, Ohio. Tuesday's games, both that will be going into the Midwest region. You've got North Carolina A&T out of the MEAC going up against Liberty out of the Big South. North Carolina A&T both kind of surprise conference winners, so really it's no shock that they ended up here in Dayton in the first 4 games. I love what Liberty has done going through that tournament with knocking off the top seeds, but in the end, I think that with the big stage on them, I think that'll be too much. North Carolina A&T has certainly been impressive in their run as well. I'm just going to give a slight edge in a very grinded-out game to North Carolina A&T. Although Liberty can score, which they scored a lot of points in that Big South tournament, I'm just going to give a slight edge to North Carolina A&T. Then the other game. I probably don't even have to tell you who I'm picking based on if you've missed the opening, where have you been? But again, I just think St. Mary's just going to go off on Middle Tennessee. I hope that happens. Matthew Dellavedova is a team slayer. He is an outstanding player. And again, as I mentioned, St. Mary's, I feel for him because of the probation that they've been put on. It's not going to be the same after this year. at least for the next 4 years, because they'll have to recruit differently. They won't have those foreign trips overseas. So I think St. Mary's should and will win that game. In the other 2 games in Dayton, these will be played on Wednesday. East Region game. LIU Brooklyn against James Madison. Again, both teams kind of surprising conference winners. LIU Brooklyn come out of the Northeast, where Robert Morris was the favorite. Folks, the Blackbirds can score. They can put up a lot of points in bunches. I watched their tournament final win. They are an outstanding scoring team. Going up against James Madison, a surprising winner in the Colonial. I think James Madison just really ran into a Northeastern team in that final that had really been put through the ringer. Northeastern had to come back the game before from a deficit. This time they couldn't come back on James Madison. I have LIU Brooklyn winning that game because of the sheer number of points that the Blackbirds can put up. And then finally the other game, which, by the way, I nailed this one. I always had these 2 teams in the last 4 in from the start, and I nailed them. Boise State taking on LaSalle. I think both teams were definitely warranted to be in the field because LaSalle, by the way, had at least 2 quality wins. So LaSalle, I think, definitely deserved to be in the field. But I like what I have seen from Boise State this season, and I know that Derek Marks had an off night in that tournament game against San Diego State in the Mountain West tournament. But I think he bounces back in a big way, and I have Boise State beating LaSalle in that game. Now, normally when it comes to your tournament challenge brackets or whatever bracket game you play, you don't pick the play-in games. You just then have to pick who you think is going to come out of that game based on whoever comes out of that game. Do they beat their next opponent? So that's critical in making your selections. All right, so now we go to the regions. Midwest region, Indianapolis. At least that's where the regional semifinals are going to be at. Second. See, they call that the first. They don't call it the first 4. They call it the first round, which is really kind of confusing. Second round games. Overall number 1 seed, Louisville. No shocker there. Louisville has just been so talented all year with Peyton Siva and company. Rick Pitino does an outstanding job as coach. They are going to be a dangerous team. I obviously have them beating the winner of North Carolina A&T and Liberty. I don't think that's even a discussion again. And I know, again, people are going to say, oh, at some point a 16 is going to beat a 1. Hey, we had 2 15s beat 2s last year. Well, that was last year. It still hasn't happened yet. No 16 has beat a 1 yet. And it might happen this year. Right? If I had to give you a pick, honestly, if I had to give you an honest pick, the best chance for a 16 to beat a 1, I would probably say LIU Brooklyn over Indiana. I mean, it's not even close because they can score. I mean, remember, LIU Brooklyn gave, the last time they were in the tournament, they gave North Carolina all they could handle. By the way, they gave North Carolina a game. I think at some point they were ahead in that game. They gave North Carolina a scare. So if it were to happen, if a 16, I get the best chance to a 16 would probably be LIU Brooklyn to beat IU. And then I'd probably say second best would probably go to probably whoever comes out of that North Carolina A&T Liberty game against Louisville. I don't give Western Kentucky much of a shot against Kansas, and I don't give Southern a shot in the world against Gonzaga. The SWAC is one of the worst conferences in the country. The SWAC can't flat out score. Their games are grinded out, low-scoring games. They're not going to be able to keep up with Kelly Olynyk and the Zags, I guarantee you. All right, back to the Midwest. So I like Louisville coming out of that first game. The 8-9 game, Colorado State and Missouri. Great game. The Rams have looked great at times this season. But Missouri and Coach Frank Haith coming out of the SEC, just a well-rounded team. I have Missouri in that game. Very controversial and very intriguing 5-12 matchup. Oklahoma State taking on Oregon. There was a lot of debate. When I saw Oregon pop up at the screen as a 12, I immediately thought, okay, something had to have happened to put the Ducks on the 12 line. They won the Pac-12 tournament. They won the Pac-12 tournament title, and they're a 12 seed. According to the committee, Oregon and Cal were both originally slated to be on the 11 line. Now, I could make a case for Cal being more on the bubble than Oregon ever was. I did not have Oregon in the bubble discussion. I had Oregon as a lock from the start. But apparently they were originally supposed to be on the 11 line, and when Mississippi won the SEC tournament, that caused some seeds to shift. So that dropped Oregon down to and Cal both to the 12 line. So certainly very surprising. But I just heard, I'm watching Cat's Corner on ESPNU where he's interviewing all the coaches. He had Oregon's coach on already, and he asked him flat out. He said, "What did you think when you saw your team as a 12 seed?" He said, "Doesn't matter. I'm just glad that we're in and we're playing." That's the attitude I like to see. That's the attitude I like to see from that or from Oregon's coach. And you know what? Even though Marcus Smart is an outstanding, outstanding player for Oklahoma State, even though he gives teams plenty of matchup issues, I think Oregon is going to come in and use that as motivation. I think Oregon is hot right now. Their Dominic Artis is back. They're a different team with him than they were without him. And in a 12-5 upset, remember, one usually always happens. There's always a 12-5 upset at some point, so make sure you include it in your brackets. I have Oregon beating Oklahoma State in that second round game in San Jose. Also, they're playing out west, so it really helps Oregon there. That's a big factor. The fact that Oregon and Cal are both playing in San Jose and they're 12 seeds, that's huge for them. The 4-13, St. Louis against New Mexico State. St. Louis is a dangerous, dangerous team. I have said it on here from the start. I watched them play the A10 final against VCU. The fact that they were able to get up and down against that havoc defense of Shaka Smart and the Rams, oh my word. If you cannot keep up with St. Louis, you are just asking for trouble. You are not going to be able to run with them if you can't keep up and make defensive stops and force turnovers. I don't think New Mexico State has that, even though I watched them in their WAC final game against I don't know. I don't even remember who they beat, but doesn't matter. I don't think they'll be able to keep up with them at all. I have St. Louis winning that game and moving through to the third round. Memphis, the 6th seed out of Conference USA against the winner of that game between Middle Tennessee and St. Mary's. Obviously, I have St. Mary's winning that game. Look, the problem that I have with Memphis is, again, they played in a very, very weak Conference USA. They really have not been tested all season long. Yes, they have 30 wins. Yes, they have a title banner now on the wall. Congratulations. If you don't test yourself against the good teams, then that's the issue I have with Memphis. I think St. Mary's, after they win that first game, is going to come out and still have a lot of fire in them. And I think, again, you've got to pick these double-digit seeds sometimes. And I think, again, there are, in fact, in this main bracket, in my gut feeling bracket this year, I have 3 11 seeds beating 6s in the first round. I think I'll tell you the one that I don't think, but because they have a bad matchup, by the way. But I think the 11s are going to be dangerous this year. I like the 11 seed, in this case, St. Mary's, I have them, or if it is Middle Tennessee, beating Memphis in that second round game. Michigan State and Valparaiso in the 3-14 game. Tom Izzo teams always tend to play really, really well come March. Michigan State made it to the Final Four of the Big Ten tournament. Duh, of course they were. That's how good they are. They always tend to play their best basketball in March. And don't get me wrong, Valparaiso, Bryce Drew coaching, great story. It'd be a great thing if they pull off another buzzer beater again. But in this case, I don't see it happening. I like Sparty to advance. Creighton and Cincinnati in the 7-10. Two very contrasting styles in this game. Doug McDermott of Creighton, the team slayer himself in that offensive team, going up against a very, very defensive-minded Cincinnati team and Coach Mick Cronin. I think Doug McDermott is just going to be a star in this tournament. I think he's going to have outstanding, outstanding play. I don't see how he could falter here. I like Creighton in that game. And then Duke going up against Albany. As much as I dislike picking Duke to win games in the tournament, I can't stand it. I don't like it. I'm not fond of Duke. You guys know that by now. I don't think Albany, though, has a prayer in the world of beating them. I like Duke in that game. All right, sticking with the Midwest region, I'm just going to go region by region on this. So then, third round games, I have Louisville taking on Missouri. As much as Missouri's very grinded out defense, that Louisville offense is so up-tempo, I don't think Missouri will be able to handle it. I have Louisville going to the Sweet 16. And then I'd have Oregon taking on St. Louis. Again, that would be a great matchup because of the way that St. Louis has their shooters going up against Artis and company. But again, I've just been so impressed by the way St. Louis has played. It's a great story, how they have come together and played this strong for their interim coach, Jim Cruz, after the passing of Rick Majerus. This St. Louis team is just feels like one of those team of destinies. You know the story they did last night in the 30 for 30, that survive and advance with Jim Valvano? That kind of feels to me like this St. Louis team, like a team of destiny surrounding them. So I have St. Louis beating Oregon and advancing to the Sweet 16. St. Mary's going up against Michigan State. Again, as much as I love Dellavedova and the fact that he's an awesome shooter, I just think Michigan State and Tom Izzo would find a way to clamp down on him and shut him down. So therefore, I like Michigan State to come out of that game. I mean, they're playing in Auburn Hills, right in Michigan State's background, or not background, backyard. It's practically going to be a home game for them. So I like Michigan State. And then here's my surprise, and I agree with one of the guys I always watch, Colin Coward. I agree with him here. Creighton against Duke in a third-round matchup. You can book it down. You can put me on the record. I don't care. I have Creighton beating Duke in the third round. The Missouri Valley has been dangerous this year. It's been dangerous in years past with the likes of Northern Iowa and Wichita State. And I think Creighton is going to fall in that same boat. I cannot pick Duke to go far in the tournament. I can't do it. It would go against just everything I believe about Duke. I just can't do it. So I'm going to pick Creighton to advance to the Sweet 16. So then in my regional semifinals in the Midwest, these would be in Indianapolis. Louisville against St. Louis. What a matchup that would be. But I think in that regard, I think Louisville would have the players to keep up with that St. Louis offense. Obviously, the defense can be strong at times. If they can shut down Syracuse for a long period of time and coming back in that Big East tournament final game after being down for so long, I admire that. I have Louisville beating St. Louis. And then I would have Michigan State taking on Creighton. A battle of just two outstanding players. Now, Michigan State has a lot of outstanding players with Appling and Derek Nix and all of them. But again, I am just so impressed by what Doug McDermott has done all year for Creighton. He has literally carried that team on his back. That game, I think, would probably go down to like a buzzer beater or something like that, or an overtime game. That would be how outstanding it would be. It would be an up and down, fast-paced game. But again, I just feel like this team is very strong, and I would go with Creighton to put them in the Elite Eight to beat Michigan State. But in the final, Louisville against Creighton, this is where the run ends for McDermott and the Blue Jays. I think the Cardinals are just overall are stronger, better coached, better talent across the board. I've so been impressed by Louisville this year, the way that they play. So I know so far it screams of chalky. And in a lot of these brackets, actually, I'm going to tell you this, in the first three, the BPI, my gut feeling in the predictor, I have Louisville going far. I have Louisville going to the Final Four. All right. West region. West region in Los Angeles, probably the weakest region of the bunch. This one has a lot of possibilities in it. Semifinals are in LA. Obviously, I've already said, with Gonzaga and Southern, that second round matchup I think Gonzaga is going to roll. Southern's a very slow-paced team coming out of the SWAC. They can't score. They can't keep up. So I like Gonzaga. The 8-9, Pittsburgh against Wichita State. The problem I have with picking Pitt is that in recent years, Pitt has been very disappointing in the tournament. They always tend to make early exits. They cannot keep up with some of these either better teams or kind of teams with these mid-major conferences that tend to play really well. Oh, look who they draw. Wichita State. Out of where? The Missouri Valley, who I've just said has made a lot of noise in the past. I like the Shockers in this one. I think they're going to win that game. Very intriguing 5-12 matchup. Wisconsin going against Ole Miss. Wisconsin, another team that tends Wisconsin, though, kind of the opposite, though, of Michigan State. Michigan State might falter at times during the season, plays really well in the tournament. Wisconsin plays really strong in the regular season, falls short in the tournament. I don't think it was maybe 2000 the last time, or maybe even a little bit later, that Wisconsin even got beyond the round of 16. They might have made the Elite Eight or Final Four. But since then, Wisconsin usually never makes it past the Sweet 16. Ever. They stumble along the way. But even though Ole Miss is red hot right now, and Andy Kennedy's got a great team with a great run with Marshall Henderson as the scorer, I think Wisconsin is at least going to get by them. I like Wisconsin in that first game. And I would have them taking on Kansas State, playing the winner of that Boise State-LaSalle game, which I have Boise State winning. Bruce Weber, to see him go against another Big Ten team, that would be an entertaining matchup if you ask me. Why? Because Bruce Weber knows the Big Ten. Oh, by the way, he came from it at Illinois. He knows the Big Ten. So I would have Kansas State beating Boise State in that second round matchup. Bottom half of the West. Here's another upset, folks. Upset alert. Ring the bell. I like Belmont, the number 11 seed, to beat Arizona. Now, I know in past years I've picked the Bruins in the upset and it hasn't quite worked out. But I tell you what, Belmont is a pure shooting team. If they get hot, they are tough to stop. And right now, as I'm talking about this game, Andy Katz, I think, is talking to the Belmont coach. I mean, Belmont is just an entertaining team. Their RPI was, at the end of the year, was number 18. 18! Are you kidding me? They also played, that means they played a very tough non-conference schedule. So Belmont knows how to play with the big boys. Belmont's a big boy, wearing the big boy pants. So I like Belmont to beat Arizona in that first game. Arizona really has really been up and down at times this season. Very kind of hard team to figure out. The 3-14 game, New Mexico against Harvard. Boy, do I love the job that Steve Alford has done with New Mexico. And Tony Snell, another one of those team slayers. He's a pure scorer. When he is on fire, you better move and get out the way, because he just goes off. He has his outstanding nights. I don't think Harvard has the horses to keep up with that. I like the Lobos in that one. What an intriguing 7-10 matchup. Notre Dame against Iowa State. Both these teams, what Notre Dame's been able to do this season with tough expectations has been outstanding. But Fred Hoiberg and the job that he has done at Iowa State has been absolutely amazing. I saw them play the 2 games against Kansas where they took them to the wire, and I said, that right there looks like a tournament team. I have Iowa State beating Notre Dame in that second round match. I think Notre Dame really is laboring into the tournament again, the Big East. I don't think they're going to go very far in terms of a lot of these teams. I like Iowa State, though, to beat Notre Dame in that matchup. And then the 2-15, even though Iona has a great player in Momo Jones, he's entertaining to watch. I think Ohio State is red hot right now. Just a very good team all around. And I really, really like them to beat Iona in that second round match. But don't be surprised if Iona gives Ohio State a run for their money. All right, third round in the West region. I have Gonzaga beating Wichita State. A very strong mid-major kind of battle there. But again, I just like the well-roundedness of Gonzaga. Unless you have a guy that can really stand up to Kelly Olynyk and shut him down, or you'll find a way to guard him, you're not going to have much success. And I think Gonzaga at least gets to the Sweet 16. Like I said, Wisconsin and Kansas State in that third round match, Bruce Weber knows the Big Ten. He came from it. He knows how to play it, and he is going to have Rodney Magruder and company just completely ready for that showdown. I like Kansas State to beat Wisconsin in the third round. Because again, Wisconsin, they don't get past the Sweet 16. Remember that. Belmont going up against New Mexico. Again, at some point you'd have to think that Belmont couldn't shoot the lights out forever. And I don't think that happens here. New Mexico, the fact they're playing in Salt Lake City, very close to home, I like New Mexico to come out of there. And I also have Ohio State beating Iowa State. Ohio State's road here, and that half of the bracket is certainly not easy. But I think the fact that Thad Matta prepares so well as a coach that he's going to be ready for his team. So I like Ohio State to beat Iowa State in that third round game. So the West, even though it's the weakest, I see it as very chalky. I have all the top 4 seeds going to the Sweet 16. I have Gonzaga, Kansas State, New Mexico, and Ohio State. So then who do I have after that? Gonzaga taking on Kansas State. This here is where things in the brackets get really kind of switchy for me. Because if you'll recall, it's only happened one time that all the number 1 seeds made the Final Four. I will tell you this right now, that Louisville is my only number 1 seed to make the Final Four. You heard it here first. The only number 1 seed that I have to make the Final Four, because I have Gonzaga losing to Kansas State in that Sweet 16 matchup. I love Magruder. He's an awesome player. And again, I think Bruce Weber just feels like he has to have some kind of redemption here because of the fact that it was so disappointing into Illinois, trying to redeem himself now with Kansas State. I think that they can find a way to stick it to Gonzaga and take them out in that matchup. I like Kansas State. I have him taking on Steve Alford and the New Mexico Lobos. I think because again, they're playing this in Los Angeles. This is West territory. Again, I know that might help people Gonzaga a bit, but I think it better favors New Mexico because of the fact that Steve Alford, by the way, oh yeah, he knows the Big Ten too. He played in the Big Ten. He played for IU. Now in this matchup, he's going up against Ohio State and Thad Matta and all their talent. You don't think Steve Alford will be ready for that? Oh yeah, I think he will. So I like New Mexico. So, in my final matchup in the West region, I have Kansas State against New Mexico. A true battle of point guards with Magruder going up against Tony Snell. But in the end, I have just been so impressed by what Alford has done with that New Mexico team. Remember this, folks. New Mexico, second in the RPI. Second. And you tell me they're a 3 seed? They're the most dangerous 3 seeds I've ever seen. I have New Mexico coming out of the West region and going to the Final Four, beating a very talented Kansas State team. All right, 1 half done, 1 half to go. Let's look at the South region. These semifinals are in Arlington. Second round and third round games in Kansas City, Auburn Hills, Austin, Philadelphia. Obviously, first game, love Kansas. Always, I'm fond of the Jayhawks, the talent they have, the job Bill Self has done with the Jayhawks, the talent around them. Yeah, the TCU loss was kind of earlier in the year. We wondered, oh my gosh, is Kansas falling apart? But they rebounded nicely. So won the Big 12 tournament over said Kansas State team that I have in the Elite Eight. So I like Kansas, obviously, to beat Western Kentucky. Don't get me wrong. The run by Western Kentucky these last few years, winning the 4 games in 4 days to win the Sun Belt title, outstanding. but they clearly were overmatched again. And hey, they got a tournament win last year. They had to play in the first four, though, in Dayton. But they had that win over Mississippi Valley State. Lost to Kentucky, the eventual champions. But at least they got in the main field this year. But you got to play Kansas. That's the downside. But I like Kansas in that game. Probably the best 8-9 matchup on paper, North Carolina, Villanova. Carolina has looked absolutely strong of late, made it all the way to the AC tournament final again for the third straight year. And yes, they lost it. They're usually losing to Duke or Florida State or someone of that nature. But this year was Miami. But Miami, very good team. North Carolina, though, is finally, I think, coming to their own. They're looking very strong. But Villanova made a late season surge, and they beat some very good teams, had 5 top 50 wins to get into the tournament. I like what they have done, but in this matchup, the fact that North Carolina has come together at the right time, and oh, by the way, who wouldn't want to see Roy Williams go up against his former team? I would, please. I'm going to take the Tar Heels over Villanova and the Wildcats. The 5-12. This one would actually be intriguing if Akron was at full strength. This is VCU going up against Akron. Obviously, the story that hit the Akron program hard, even though they went on to win the MAC tournament, their starting point guard, Alex Abreu, suspended for trafficking and possession of marijuana. When I watched them play Kent State immediately following, they didn't look like the same team. They lost to Kent State by 4 at home. I said stick a fork in Akron, they're done. I thought they were going to lose to Ohio in the MAC final, and apparently they caught Ohio on an off night because Akron simply dominated Ohio, beat them by 19. So no DJ Cooper this year, but I still don't think this is the same Akron team. You're going up against a VCU pressure defense, that Havoc defense, that is outstanding. They pressure you. They pressure the ball every single time in the backcourt. They try to trap you. That's how they force turnovers. I think this VCU team is just as dangerous as the one that made the Final Four in 2011. They're not going to surprise anybody anymore, but I think they're still dangerous. I have VCU beating Akron that first game. Here again is where I see an upset of brewing, though. I've mentioned him on here before. Michigan against South Dakota State. That team slayer, Nate Wolters. Oh, by the way, do you remember that he put up 53 on IPFW? And I know IPFW is not exactly a good tournament team. But he is just an outstanding shooter, pure player. And I know Michigan's got talent there with Trey Burke and Hardaway and the crew and all the gang. But I love what they have done late season. And Michigan last year, they were in the same position last year. 4-13, Michigan against Ohio, going up against a pure scoring DJ Cooper. And how did that turn out? Oh, yeah, they lost to Ohio. I think it happens again this year. I like South Dakota State to upset Michigan in that second round game. UCLA and Minnesota in a 6-11 game. Again, this one would be intriguing if one of the teams is at full strength. UCLA lost Jordan Adams to that foot injury in the tournament semifinal. No, not 100%. This is a very popular upset pick on Tournament Challenge, and I am with the majority on this one. I think Minnesota is going to, with Trevor Mbakwe, I think they're finally going to play like a very good Minnesota team, the team that beat IU, and not the team that lost to the likes of Nebraska and Purdue. I think that they're going to come in and be fired up, ready to go, and I think they beat UCLA in that game. And I have them playing Florida. Florida, again, another very dangerous number 3 seed. Billy Donovan teams always play really, really well no matter who's on the roster. I obviously have them beating Northwestern State in the first round game, although Northwestern State, they've been in this position before as well. Remember, they were a 14 seed on their last tournament appearance, and on a last-second three-pointer, they beat Iowa. But I don't think it's going to happen against the Gators. I think the Gators too talented, too strong. I like Florida. San Diego State against Oklahoma. What a coaching matchup this is. Steve Fisher against Lon Kruger. Lon Kruger making some history for Oklahoma. The only coach to take 5 teams to the NCAA tournament. That's an outstanding job. But I have mucho mad respect for Steve Fisher. Just an outstanding job that he's done with the Aztecs. I like them to beat Oklahoma in a very, very grinded out kind of game. And then finally, even though this is this very, again, one of those very scary 2-15 matchups, it wouldn't shock me if Iona, like for example, beat Ohio State on the other side of the bracket. It would also not shock me if Florida Gulf Coast, considering the fact they could score, could beat Georgetown. But I just think in the end, Georgetown too strong, too physical. This is a team making their first appearance in the tournament. That usually doesn't go well. I like Georgetown in this game. Then third round matchups. The creme de la creme. Roy Williams going up against his old crew. Kansas against North Carolina. That is going to be must-see TV if it were to happen. But in the end, I think Bill Self's team again with McLemore and Withey and all those guys, just too well-rounded. I think Kansas is going to beat North Carolina, but that will be a very entertaining game. Wouldn't be shocked if that one goes to overtime or more. VCU taking on South Dakota State, a bracket buster game right there in the third round. As much as talented as Nate Wolters is, the Havoc defense and Shaka Smart are going to have an answer for him. They're going to find a way to shut him down. And if Michigan goes out and that bracket opens up for VCU, the Rams are going to take advantage of it. I like VCU to beat South Dakota State and get to the Sweet 16. Minnesota taking on Florida. Here, I think here's where Minnesota might kind of shrink back into that shell of theirs. Florida always tends, again, one of those teams kind of like Michigan State that plays really, really well when it comes to tournament time come March. So I like Florida to beat Minnesota in that third round match. And that has them taking on Georgetown, who I think will beat San Diego State in that other third round game. So here I have a 1, a 5, a 3, and a 2. Not a whole lot of surprises here either in the South, although it's a bit tougher region. I don't see a whole lot of big surprises coming out of this region. But then you have a rematch here. You have Kansas taking on VCU. In 2011, in the Elite Eight game, VCU, the surprise of the tournament, the darlings from the first four who made it all the way there, taking on the number 1 seed Jayhawks. And VCU rolled to a 10-point victory, and they were on to the Final Four. As I've said, this VCU team I think is maybe even better than the one that made the Final Four 2 years ago. And Kansas, even though very well-rounded team, they're going to be scared the pants off them and have to face VCU again. Kansas did not want to see VCU in the exact same draw as them, I can guarantee you that. So for that reason alone, and because Shaka Smart knows Kansas and knows he can beat them, I have VCU beating Kansas yet again and getting to the Elite Eight. And I have them taking on Florida. Again, Florida to me, a very scary number 3 seed. I think the fact that they are just so well coached by Billy Donovan and very well rounded, I think they would be able to overcome that Georgetown team. So in the end, in the final, I have VCU taking on Florida. And I think because Florida plays in a very grinded out SEC, I think Florida could find a way to overcome that Havoc pressure defense. And so I have Florida getting to the Final Four in Atlanta, beating VCU in the South Regional Final. One region left, folks, before then I reveal my Final Four picks and who I have to win it all in my Fearsome Pickin' Gut Feeling Bracket. This is the one I'm sharing with you. I play 7 on Tournament Challenge, and you can see them there if you want to, if you search the Tournament Challenge entries. All my brackets are in the Fans of Purdue group. So if you look there for the Fans of Purdue group, you find in there, you'll see all 7 of my brackets. But here, the one I'm sharing with you is my gut feeling bracket that usually tends to do really well. The one that I'm the most confident in. East Region. These games, semifinals, would be Washington, D.C. Second and third round games in Dayton, San Jose, Lexington, and Austin. Obviously, I have IU winning their first game, whether it be against LIU Brooklyn or JMU, James Madison. But as I said, if I were to pick probably the best chance for a 16 to upset a one, it would probably be the Blackbirds of LIU Brooklyn. But I think IU in the end just too talented, too physical, too strong. I would have them winning that first game, whoever they play. NC State Temple, another very intriguing 8-9 matchup. Temple has been really red hot of late with some big wins down the stretch to get in the field. But I like C.J. Leslie and NC State. I love what they've done this year. I'm going to take the Wolfpack in that one. And usually also when I pick Temple, it doesn't go well. I've picked Temple to be an upset team in the past, and they've let me down. Not this year, Temple Owls. The 5-12 game, and this one another one of those that's very, very controversial. UNLV and Cal, the rematch. These two teams met earlier in the year. UNLV absolutely destroyed Cal. But this game, again, is being played pretty much right in Cal's backyard. It's being played in San Jose. So for that reason alone, and because of the fact that I think, again, Alan Crabb is a star in his own right, I like Cal in this one. Again, another 12-5 upset. I have two of them in this bracket. I also had Oregon. I like Cal to beat UNLV. But here probably is an even bigger one. This region, this East region, I think, has the potential to get really, really blown up. This East region, I think, is so tough. I think it's probably, besides the Midwest, I think the East is probably one of the tougher regions out there. This has the potential to be a just blow-up region because there's a very dangerous team from the Big Sky Conference in this region, the Montana Grizzlies. I watched them play in their final against Weber State, and now that Will Cherry is back and a very strong player, and the fact that they just have pure shooters that can score, Montana, I think, can really, really make some noise. I have them beating Syracuse in that second-round game. Syracuse recently has had a tendency to crash out early in the tournament as well when they run into these hot, kind of streaky shooting teams. You remember they lost to Vermont in the past. So I think Montana is going to beat Syracuse in that second-round game. Bottom half of the region. This is the only 11 seed that I do not have winning a first-round game or second-round game. And although they certainly can, it's because they're playing Butler. And we know what Butler's done the last 2 years. Butler's made the national championship the last 2 seasons. Or, excuse me, not the last 2 seasons, but the 2 seasons in 2010 and 2011. Will Butler do that this year? I highly doubt it. But Bucknell is, again, one of those streaky teams when they shoot. But Butler's defense just really, really grinds at you and makes you earn points. It's just so, so tough. So I like Butler to win that game. Bucknell, the only 11 seed that I don't have winning their first game. I have Butler playing Marquette. I like Marquette to beat Davidson. Even though Davidson, again, are very kind of those scary, maybe sleeper teams. I don't see it here because Buzz Williams and Marquette is an outstanding coach, plays in a very tough conference in the Big East, and I think Marquette is scary good. So I like Marquette. 7-10, Illinois taking on Colorado. Spencer Dinwiddie for Colorado. Remember his name. He is an outstanding player for the Buffs, going up against Illinois with Brandon Paul, Tyler Griffey and the crew. That's going to be an outstanding matchup just on paper alone. But I think in the end, I really, really like what Colorado has done this season. They made a great run last year to the Pac-12 tournament. I like Colorado in this game because I think they can score more than Illinois can. And I have them playing Miami. Miami and the job that Jim Larinaga has done with this team with Shane Larkin and the talent around him, outstanding player. I have them beating Pacific in that second-round match. Then third-round games. Indiana taking on NC State. I still like Indiana to advance to the Sweet 16. Just too much talent around them. I think would overpower that NC State team. I go with the Hoosiers to the Sweet 16. California taking on Montana in the only 12-13 matchup that I have in the tournament, but I think it would be a good one. But in the end, though, I still think Montana is a very, very dark horse team. I think they're going to be this lower digit seed that somehow sneaks their way into the Sweet 16. I like Montana to beat California and setting up a showdown with IU in the Sweet 16. Watch out for the Grizz. Butler taking on Marquette. Butler knows how to beat Big East teams. Oh, by the way, they've done it in the past on their runs. Remember they beat Syracuse? They know how to beat the best of the Big East. So for that reason alone, I'm going to take Butler to beat Marquette and go to the Sweet 16, where I would have them taking on Miami. Again, very well-rounded team, well coached by Jim Larinaga. I would have them beating Colorado. So the East Regional Semis in Washington, D.C. So here I have a 1, a 2, I have a top 2, but then I also have a 6 and a 13. That's how dangerous I think this East region is going to be. I do have IU, though, ending Montana's run in the Sweet 16. Be a great story for Montana, but again, I just think IU, too well-rounded overall, I think would have a chance to clamp down on those Montana shooters. I have IU going to the Elite Eight. I would have them taking on Jim Larinaga and Miami. I think they could overpower that Butler team, although Butler very well rounded with players like Rodney Clark and the crew. I don't think it'd be enough in the end. I like Miami. So I have 1 versus 2 here in the East. This is the only region that I have 1 versus 2 going at it. You've got to have some variety when it comes to picking these brackets. So here, 1 versus 2, IU versus Miami. And even though Indiana has been a great story this year to see that program come back, the resurgence of the team, I have just been so impressed by the job that Jim Larinaga has done. I think he deserves another shot at the Final Four, and I would have Miami beating Indiana to get to the Final Four. Like I said, I only have 1 number 1 seed. So in the end, here is what I have in the Final Four. I have 1 number 1 seed in Louisville, a 2 seed in Miami, and 2 number 3s, the 2 most dangerous number 3s in this tournament, in New Mexico and Florida. So then, final national semifinals. First one, I have Louisville taking on New Mexico. As much as I love Tony Snell and the job that he has done for New Mexico, I think they're just outmatched here by Peyton Sieva and Louisville. Louisville's just been so well-rounded all year and just plays hard and with a purpose, and the job that Rick Pitino does, I think he deserves a shot here. They went to the Final Four last year, lost to a very good Kentucky team, but Louisville's so well-rounded, so well-coached. I like Louisville to beat New Mexico. And then a Sunshine State showdown in the second semifinal. Florida taking on Miami. And again, even though Billy Donovan seems to prepare well for the tournament, and they certainly could win that game and make it to their national championship game, I just think Miami and Shane Larkin are on a mission this year to prove that Miami is back as a strong program. I like Miami to beat Florida and make it to the final. So, my championship game, Louisville against Miami. And this will be an up and down, fast-paced, very strong basketball game all across the board if this were to happen. Rick Pitino, Jim Larinaga. On the paper, it seems like not much of a match. But when it comes to the talent that is on the floor, when it comes just to all the intangibles included, it's going to be a close game. It's going to be exciting. I hope it's not a slow, low-scoring game like we've seen in past years. In the end, I have the Louisville Cardinals cutting down the nets in Atlanta and Rick Pitino finally standing once again atop college basketball as the winning coach. Louisville 77, Miami 72. Sign it, print it, book it. That's how I have it going. Guys, I just want to say to all you out there who watch, I know this hasn't got a whole lot of views, but for all of you that have, thank you for being on this journey with me, for tracking the madness all this time long. I cannot wait to see how this tournament shakes out. It is going to be just absolutely outstanding. Good luck with your picks. Good luck with your brackets. If you want to share them with me, hey, feel free. leave your links below. And if you have any comments or questions, I will try to answer as many as I can with you guys. Thank you so much. Don't forget, if I have a chance to watch the games, I'll be working a lot of early shifts in the few days to come, so I'll be able to watch the night session games. I'll be live tweeting during those games at my Twitter account at Fearsonator. You can follow me on there. So just check me out. Thank you guys again so much for following this with me, and enjoy the games, enjoy the madness. It is one of the most outstanding times of the year to be a sports fan, a college basketball fan in general. And even if, in my case, if you didn't call the whole field right, and you're not Joe Lenardi, who got them all right, it's still an outstanding time of year. Thank you guys. Good luck. God bless, and enjoy the madness.